Well, good afternoon from London, good morning from Bermuda, and I'm delighted to chair this session focusing on Bermuda as one of the financial centres of the World Series. I'm really pleased to have with us today the Honourable Jason Hayward, Minister of the Economy and Labour in the Bermuda Parliament. Vaughan Collier, who's with me here in London, Senior Corporate Counsel of Viewsmont Law Limited, and Tim Reid from Bermuda, Chief Marketing Officer at Your Partners. I'm really looking forward to this session with a focus on the financial sector in Bermuda. I'm Mike Wardle, I'm the CEO here at the ZN Group. My job today is to chair the session, which means really introducing, getting out of the way, and then handling the Q&A. And I'd like to say a big thank you to our sponsors at the FS Club. We're really fortunate to have their support, which enables us to run this series of webinars and range widely over the fields of economics, science, technology, and other interesting issues. The programme today is quite simple. My job is really to introduce and get out of the way so that we can hear particularly from the Minister, the keynote presentation, and then to host a discussion with Vaughan and Tim, and to handle your questions as well.
Thank you, Mike, and certainly it's a pleasure to be here this morning, and thanks for having me. The aim of my ministry is the Ministry of Economy and Labour. We're ultimately responsible for economic growth, economic development, and the expansion of jobs in Bermuda. Earlier this year, we've released our economic development strategy. That is a robust strategy that would lead us into a greater level of economic stability over the next few years, and it's kind of focused on 5 strategic priority areas: local and international business retention and expansion, ensuring that we appropriately market the Bermuda as a first-class business jurisdiction and attract foreign direct investment, enhancing our landscape as it pertains to entrepreneurship and small business development, and we focus on items featured in our economic recovery plan, was the plan that we put in place to act as a catalyst to the economic rebound after the pandemic. And then we have an area of the strategy in which we focus on people. And so I'm pleased to present this morning some of the key elements that make us a top-class financial jurisdiction, and also share a little bit about Bermuda's business proposition. As I travel the globe and meet with companies that desire to domicile in Bermuda, many don't fully appreciate the business proposition that Bermuda has to offer. And so opportunities like this opportunity this morning is great because it gives us an opportunity to engage with potential businesses, share a little bit about Bermuda, and hopefully entice companies to move and domicile in Bermuda. Next slide. And so ultimately, we want to be a jurisdiction where people live, work, and play. At the end of this presentation, what you're going to find is that Bermuda simply has it all. And when we discuss with potential businesses about domicile in Bermuda, when we look at our value proposition versus the value proposition of our jurisdictions, and persons are ticking the boxes as pertains to what are their expectations from a jurisdiction or a domicile, you'll find that Bermuda ticks most of this individual's boxes. Next slide. And so a little bit about Bermuda. Bermuda is only 21 square miles. We sit in the middle of the Atlantic. We are 2 hours off the east coast of the United States. As it pertains to our economy, in real terms, our economy is just under $6.5 billion. And when we look at our population is just over 63,000 individuals, which means that our GDP per capita is extremely high, and we rank as one of the top 10 jurisdictions in the world as it pertains to GDP per capita. When we look at our economic structure, our economy right now is extremely resilient and continues to grow. Our economy has expanded beyond pre-pandemic levels, and we are pleased of that level of growth within our economy. The international business sector represents over 28.1% of all economic activity, and that's mainly insurance, reinsurance is the bulk of our international business sector. Our second largest sector is real estate and renting, and then the third largest sector within our economy is financial and insurance services. And there's a local financial and insurance service, while we'll find our offshore financial and insurance service lumped in under international business. Next slide. And so let me talk a little bit about our value proposition. Individuals, when they're looking for a place to work or domicile a company, they're looking for a place which is relatively safe, secure, and stable. And Bermuda provides all of that from an economic standpoint. We have a level of economic stability. Our dollar is 1-for-1 with the US dollar, and you can also use US currency in Bermuda. From a political standpoint, we have a mature parliament with a great level of political stability. What you will find as part of our value proposition is the engagement between government and business to ensure that we have a business ecosystem that allows businesses to thrive. So it's ongoing engagement, and we are flexible in terms of our policy development and legislative development to ensure that we support businesses as best as we possibly can to get the right outcomes. Next slide. And so I've mentioned that Bermuda is a blue chip jurisdiction. We've been regarded as a developed blue chip jurisdiction for some time. We have favorable ratings by all of the global rating agencies, and we continue to have favorable ratings. I talked about our international business sector being 28% of our economy. That can only happen if we have a first-class business ecosystem which allows those companies to thrive. We have had a well-established business environment for over 70 years now. And so we're well mature in terms of our journey of business development. We are viewed as a developed country, and we have a strong regulatory environment. We have strong financial services, which supports businesses that domicile here. We have sound law and civil policy, which gives that level of certainty that businesses are looking for when they're choosing a jurisdiction to domicile. Next slide. So Bermuda is open, accessible, and business friendly. And what I'll say to that is that international business in Bermuda is deemed to be everybody's business. And so the induced and indirect impact of international business in our economy is unparalleled to any other industry. And as a result, you find that the services that we provide in Bermuda will all go to ensuring that we have a business environment that works on behalf of businesses. As it pertains to us being accessible, we can talk about all of our business-friendly regulation and how our regulator actually works with business to encourage innovation and to also be firm but flexible. Firm in terms of we want to ensure that we maintain a strong regulatory reputation, but flexible in terms of if a business wants to grow or wants to roll out products that are not currently underneath our regulatory environment, how quickly we can adapt our regulations to facilitate that level of growth. When we talk about business friendly, we talk about how we've reduced the level of red tape is required to start up a business in Bermuda. And I think in the dialogue after this presentation, you will find that persons will be able to share some of their experiences as it pertains to setting up and starting business in Bermuda. Next slide. And so Bermuda is globally connected. We have direct flights to the US, Canada, and the UK, but we also have direct business ties with each and every one of those financial centers. And so that is extremely important. When we look at our regulations, we have reciprocal jurisdiction status with both the US and UK, so businesses that are domiciled in Bermuda can operate globally without any regulatory impediments. When we talk about how we position ourselves, we look at competition and we see what our competitors are doing in North America and in Europe, and we want to ensure that we have an environment that is on par with our competitors, whether it be in the Caribbean and Latin America as well. And so we kind of have our finger on the pulse in Bermuda, and the jurisdiction, the location of the jurisdiction allows us to tap into multiple markets and allows companies who are domiciled in Bermuda to have effective global presence. Next slide. And last but not least, Bermuda offers a high quality of living. And so, as I mentioned, Bermuda has one of the better GDP per capita in the world. We rank in the top 10, but we also have strong human resource capability to service businesses that are currently here. When we talk about our community and our culture, we have very rich culture that I'm extremely proud about, but a culture that allows persons to integrate into our society in a very seamless way. All of the amenities that one would require from a business jurisdiction, we actually have, whether it's our healthcare system, whether persons want to engage in sports at the highest level. And then I've been in overseas British territory for 400 years now, and so we have a rich history and a lot of preservation of that history as well. And I think that individuals find that to be appealing. When we talk about the standard of living we had, is based off of also the salaries that persons are able to acquire in Bermuda. Employees, you will find in Bermuda, are remunerated higher than most of their counterparts in the same positions in global firms worldwide. And so there is a level of affluence in Bermuda, and Bermuda does offer that high quality of life to not only for an individual, but to raise families as well. Next slide. And so when we talk about our international business sector, we are known as the world's risk capital. We've been covering risk, or companies in Bermuda have been covering risk in the United States primarily for decades. We specialize in property and catastrophe risk, but we're also now becoming a leading domicile for what we consider long-term insurance, and that will be life and annuity insurance. Bermuda was also the inventors of the modern captive insurance companies. And so from 1962, we have specialized in captive insurance. We had the leading market share in captive insurance. We do have now some competitive jurisdictions which are seeking to expand in captive insurance, but we still believe that Bermuda is the best place for persons to have their captives. We are innovative in the insurance space. We continue to see growth in our property and catastrophe insurance, but not just in property and catastrophe. We now see our insurers underwriting political risk, cyber insurance, and also parametric insurance for developing countries who need that level of insurance coverage. Next slide. Asset management is an area where we had leading market share in, and we kind of took our foot off the pedal. But as it pertains to the economic development strategy that we rolled out, we really want to enhance our offerings in investment fund management. We are leaders in the insurance-linked security space, and the Bermuda Stock Exchange is actually the leading exchange for insurance-linked securities, and we have over 80% of the market as it pertains to insurance-linked securities. I think that is kind of adjacent to our insurance industry, and we find that persons who want to diversify their investment portfolio find insurance-linked securities as rewarding alternative investments. We also want to enhance our offerings as it pertains to private equity funds, and we want to also position ourselves as the climate risk capital of the world. We, being an island territory, have had to deal with climate risk our entire lives. But we also have insurers who have specialized in underwriting catastrophe. And so we have a level of expertise in Bermuda as it pertains to climate risk solutions. And we want to position ourselves to close funding gaps as it pertains to coverage for climate risk, but also have financial vehicles available for persons to invest in. So whether it be blue funds or green funds, which those funds actually go into investing into solutions to mitigate some of the climate challenges that the world is actually facing. Next slide. As it pertains to technology, we have ambitious plans to become a tech hub in the world. In 2018, we rolled out one of the world's most comprehensive and first set of regulations for digital assets, and that was the Digital Asset Business Act. At this point in time, we have licensed 23 digital asset companies and exchanges in Bermuda, and we are also seeking to expand the framework of that current regulation. I think what we found in Bermuda that our aim was never to attract volume, but our aim was always to attract high value companies that actually fit within our regulatory environment. We also want to expand in the area of insurtech. We have a large insurance tech sector, and to create efficiencies and help that sector maximize its output, I think that expanding our offering in the insurtech space is something that we will have an active strategy on, and our regulator facilitates the innovation in that particular sector. But if I can step back, what we ultimately want to do in Bermuda is bring fintech from kind of the fringes of society and integrate it into the mainstream activities. And so how we improve our e-commerce, how we improve our payments and processing, how we transition into having a smart city, all of those are the future plans of what Bermuda wants to be. The other thing is that we need to ensure that we have a population that is tech savvy as well. And so we heavily invest in the training and development of our human capabilities on island so that we can have a thriving technology environment. Next slide. Services for high net worth individuals are a keen area focused for the government. We've done well as establishing ourselves as a first-class trust jurisdiction. I think that our regulatory framework, our legal certainty that comes from our judicial system, and then also our internationally recognized law firms that we have here provide an appropriate framework for trust companies to domicile here and operate out of Bermuda. And we've been successful thus far. As it pertains to family offices, we want to increase our family office framework. And so what we're going to do is have a deliberate effort to attract family offices into Bermuda and to ensure that Bermuda is competitive in that particular space. We believe that Bermuda's business ecosystem is primed to attract single family offices and high net worth services to Bermuda. And the offerings that we have catered to persons who are looking for an offshore jurisdiction to place their family office or engage in high net worth service activities. After the pandemic, we launched an economic investment and residential certificate program, and that program was designed to attract more persons to reside and invest in Bermuda. And so we said that if an individual invests $2.5 million in Bermuda, whether it be into a new business, an existing business, real estate, or a donation to charity, then we'll issue an indefinite residential certificate to those individuals. One stipulation on the certificate is that individuals need to reside in Bermuda for at least 90 days out of the calendar year. What we have found is that that program is going extremely well. Over the last 2 years, we have more than $440 million of associated investment in alignment with our economic investment and residential certificate program. Numbers that have exceeded our expectations, but we are extremely proud of. And so we are continuing to market that because we now know that there is sufficient demand for that sort of product out there in the market. And we continue to welcome high net worth individuals to our shores. Next slide. And so in summary, we have a very robust framework in place for how we are going to diversify and expand our economy. From a financial services standpoint, we seek to expand in a number of areas that I just articulated. We have global accounting firms that provide professional services to firms that are domiciled in Bermuda. We have global law firms that provide the legal services to companies that are domiciled in Bermuda. We have huge capacity as it pertains to human capital to staff companies that are domiciled in Bermuda. If companies are here and they can't find the human capital, then it's our responsibility as a government from an immigration standpoint to ensure that there is an efficient process for those companies to get the staff that they need in a timely manner. And so the key pillars of our business ecosystem is having a strong regulatory environment, having the professional services that companies actually need to succeed, and then a government that is willing to engage with industry to ensure that we have an environment that allows them to thrive. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Minister. That was a really excellent overview of where Bermuda is. I'm going to invite Tim to join us again on the panel as we move into a discussion section. And really just I want to take the opportunity of having Bourne with me here in London to ask Bourne, you've been working in Bermuda and just really wanted to know about your experience in advising businesses who are setting up as digital asset businesses. What's your experience with that? What's working and what's slightly more challenging?
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Minister and attendees. My story is a very interesting one because I have recently moved to Bermuda, just slightly over a year, and I've had a extremely positive experience working in the jurisdiction, working with fellow professionals and also clients. And in particular, my focus has been working with clients who are launching businesses and receiving licenses in the area of digital assets and fintech. And before I moved to Bermuda, that was part of my practice working in London. And I can say that I had the benefit of a very contrasting experience where in the United Kingdom and in the London market for cryptocurrency, as it's referred to, the regulation is still taking shape. And so I had a couple of transactions where I was working with clients who wanted to develop businesses and new business structures in the digital asset cryptocurrency space. And what they found in the London market was some natural limitations because of the lack of regulation. What Bermuda has done very well in that particular sector, and I was very keen to speak today because I think it's reflective of the jurisdiction and the island's approach to new business and seeking opportunities, is that within the digital asset cryptocurrency space, Bermuda has a very flexible but sophisticated regime both statute and accompanying regulation overseen by the Bermuda Monetary Authority, which is the island's universal regulator, oversees all financial institutions. And Bermuda has the benefit of having introduced legislation relatively early, so back in 2018, as the Minister mentioned. Having then had the regulator have the experience over many years introducing that legislation, and with the end result that in my practice, which is advising clients to come to Bermuda, set up business and get licenses to then launch their businesses in Bermuda, serving clients around the world, I've had a very easy process working with those laws and the regulator to give advice to clients and to help them with their businesses. And the digital assets industry in Bermuda has grown quite successfully and really has emerged as a success story worldwide for Bermuda in that sector. And a couple of the larger name digital asset businesses that have recently moved within the last year include Coinbase, the large stock exchange listed digital asset exchange business, which began life in the US and has begun, and Tim, I know, has some involvement and interaction on the client side, which Tim can perhaps talk about. So overall, because of the sophistication of the regulations, the skill of the regulators and their experience, it's been a very, very positive experience for me coming to Bermuda and then working in that jurisdiction as a legal advisor.
Well, thank you very much. I think moving on, Tim, once a business has been through that process and have been licensed on the digital asset businesses program, what can clients expect once they've achieved that milestone and they're operating a business?
Well, I just wanted to start off by just telling a really quick personal story that I think reflects the overall value prop that Minister Hayward was discussing, because it is quite extraordinary. I came down in fall of 2020 during COVID. I was working on Wall Street in fintech and digital assets. And like a lot of you, I found out in the fall of 2020 that my children were going to be homeschooled, basically doing their schoolwork remotely. And that wasn't acceptable to my wife. So she convinced us to move internationally during a pandemic. We ended up in Bermuda to put our kids in school in a live format. And by the way, the schools are phenomenal down here for anyone who ends up coming down. But besides that, I couldn't believe that Bermuda had such a thriving fintech and digital asset scene. I really didn't see it coming. And when you look at the registered and licensed digital asset companies down here, there's a lot of big names. There's a lot of small names too in those 23 companies, but you've got Coinbase now, you've got Cash App, you've got Jewel Bank, which some of you may have heard of, which got the first banking license, I think, Minister Haywood, in 40 years in Bermuda. So they're going to be a fully digital licensed bank. And there's many, many more. So there's a lot of exciting things going on down here. And when I look at the types of companies, they're really infrastructure providers. They're playing the long game. They're not sort of the hokey, get rich quick, high risk ICO companies that a lot of the offshore jurisdictions used to see. So it's really serious players. And the regulator here is really kind of famous for being not only highly credible, but being extremely rigorous. And it's not for everybody. So companies come and we get calls all the time. Hey, tell us about Bermuda. And when they find out how rigorous it is, some of them just elect to go somewhere else where it's going to be a lot easier and cheaper. But, you kind of reap with what you sow. And so we see here people actually are willing to go through that rigor in order to come out the backside with a license that makes their end client and their institutional investors very comfortable, that there's regulatory clarity in a jurisdiction that has a very high bar and a great reputation. So it's a win-win for everybody. What I've seen, well, first of all, the company that I ended up starting here unexpectedly 4 years ago was with some Bermudians who also had a lot of fintech experience from previous lives in London and other financial centers. And we've worked with the BDA which is the business development, Bermuda's business development agency, and the Premier's FinTech concierge service, and the law firms. And what happens is interested companies come in and express interest, usually through the law firm, but sometimes through these other places I just mentioned. And then once they've sort of got their application in process, my company called Your Partners gets a call, and we help fill a gap in the market where the legal process ends and the company's sort of in the waiting process for the BMA, which can be several months depending on how organized you are. And what we can start to do is help execute like what we call a land and expand strategy, which is really important to the companies, and where there's sort of been complaints in the past, like, where do I go now? I've submitted my application. I need office space. I need payroll providers, auditors. I need to open bank accounts for the entity. I need to look at what my footprint's going to be for economic substance in terms of people. And a lot of times these companies are planning on cutting down on day one with like a 10-person full-time headcount. It's a smaller entity, and they're going to grow over time. But the BMA is very serious about creating economic substance. You can't come in here and just submit your application and run your business and not be serious about growing your footprint on the island. So we at Your Partners really help think through what that should be over sort of a 24-month period. And we have these interim specialized executive, we have a bench, basically, people we can bring in. So I, for example, am the senior rep, which is required under the DABA Act. You have to have a senior representative on the ground in Bermuda. So I happen to be the senior rep for one of Coinbase's entities. And we have our other partners who are senior reps for other companies. And we do that for a certain period of time while we help find, we have a recruiting arm, and we help find a full-time replacement for ourselves, which generally takes about 6 to 9 months. And by the time we found someone, usually the license has been granted, and then we tag out, and you're off to the races with like a full-time chief compliance officer, maybe a junior compliance person under them. And so it's good, and we're trying to upskill Bermudians as well. There's definitely some natural talent down here. A lot of the compliance risk type people are in the insurance and reinsurance world. Some of that skill set is transferable relatively seamlessly to the digital asset world. But we see with all of the companies coming in being licensed, we're going to need more talent. And so we're working on projects now through a new trade association that I happen to be working on pro bono at the minute with a bunch of other people. It's called Bermuda Next, and I encourage you to go to next.bm is the website. I'm looking at it right now, but it lists all of the registered and licensed digital asset companies. And all of them have expressed interest. You know, they want to check the box and add people, but we need to upskill more folks. So we're working on some education programs, and there's a lot of really interesting people here. And the Bermuda College has a compliance training course. So that's really, you know, since we're the risk capital of the world, that's really sort of the talent that we're trying to help create. But those are the types of things that these companies are looking for, sort of back office, headcount, you know, getting insurance companies, getting their entities set up to land and expand.
That's great. Thank you very much. I was going to just come to that point of talent attraction, I guess. It's an issue which faces a lot of financial centres. I don't know, Minister, whether you want to say maybe a word about where Bermuda's strategy is for making sure you maintain your existing talent and attract new talent into the island.
And so I mentioned that part of our economic development strategy, one of the key priorities was people. And that is ensuring, number one, that we develop human capital, which is on island, to the fullest potential. But also, number two, retain the talent, the expatriate talent that is on island, and ensuring that we create opportunities for them to expand their roles as well, as it pertains to moving upwards within a company and also expanding out and developing their own companies as well. And really using immigration as a lever for greater levels of economic activity. So we'll focus heavily on development of our current population, but then we're also focused on ensuring that we have integration of talent where supply doesn't necessarily align with demand. And then once we get talent here, it's about how do we ensure that there is retention of that talent so that they don't take the knowledge and institutional knowledge that they've developed on Ireland and take it elsewhere. How do we retain those individuals and their families as best as we possibly can? And so we have a retention strategy for local talent as well. But we want to ensure that we provide our young people with proper career guidance so that they are preparing themselves for the jobs of the current jobs and jobs of the future. And so that's us liaising with industry to see where those talent gaps are and then be deliberate about filling those gaps where they exist.
Thank you so much for that. Shane Drinian in the audience has asked about what are the regulatory features in Bermuda that have created the stable environment and the good reputation you have for international finance. I don't know who wants to have a go at that. I wonder whether Bourne really wants to talk about the regulatory framework and how it builds that reputation, which has given an international finance model for Bermuda.
Certainly, I think there's many features and factors that contribute to the very high sophistication of Bermuda's regulatory framework. I thought I would speak about two, and then others can chip in. And one is very much in my area. So I'm currently at one of the smaller domestic legal firms, which is Beesmont Law Limited, which has been around a couple of decades. We have specializations in corporate investment funds, some litigation, also digital assets. So one of the features that Bermuda has in its jurisprudence is it has its own court system, which operates on Bermuda law, which is based around common law, and it has an appeal structure which is overseen by the Privy Council. So I was just speaking to the core of the legal framework of jurisprudence in Bermuda being what is probably the best internationally considered system of jurisprudence, which is English law, similar to many other of the British overseas territories. And then I think added to that, and one that has a feature that is considered particularly important in ensuring the success of Bermuda, and that is, as I mentioned, the skill of the regulator, its heritage and depth, and also one particularly important aspect of the framework is a very robust regime for detecting and preventing money laundering, terrorist financing. That is something where a lot of work has been done. Recently, Bermuda has had successful inspection visits from international bodies such as MoneyMal and the Financial Action Task Force. And as part of an ongoing process of improvement, authorities in Bermuda recently carried out a reappraisal of the national risk assessment and identified new risks and are led by the Bermuda Authority. So those are two features I would point out. Others can probably chip in. For example, as the Minister mentioned, Bermuda has a leading and long heritage in the insurance industry, which is led from decades. But those are two that I mentioned.
Minister, anything you'd like to add?
Most certainly. And so our regulator was formed in 1969. And the regulator that we have regulates all financial services. So there's a level of consistency and clarity. And so whether it be banking, whether it be trust and asset management, whether it be insurance, reinsurance, long-term insurance, we have one regulator. And I think companies find great comfort that they can build a relationship with the regulator and work through whatever issues they may have. But having one regulator means that you have a level of regulatory clarity that doesn't exist in other jurisdictions. you don't have to go to multiple regulators for different financial products. And so if you have an investment arm to your company, if you have a trust arm to your country, if you have an insurance arm, it is all regulated by the same regulator. We also have strong tax exchange agreements with most OECD countries, which means that it kind of raises Bermuda's prominence on a global business scale in terms of having a regulator that is well recognized by financial jurisdictions around the world. And then the other thing was mentioned is that the regulator is firm but flexible. And so it's firm because it wants to maintain the standards which are set for the jurisdiction, but flexible in terms of working with innovators. Even when we talk about the business asset legislation, it's a 3-tiered legislation in terms of you can start out with a test license and then progress to a modified license and a full license. That gives companies the ability to really take their innovative ideas and then bring it and develop it into a full-fledged concept that they can place into the market. And I think that is some of the key benefits of the regulator that we do have.
Yeah,
thank you very much. We've got time, I think, just to feed in one more question, Tim. I'll come back to you in a minute if I may. But the questions from Neeraj Modi in the audience is just saying what the link is between Bermuda's ambition to bring in new companies and the inflow of people into the country and the development of infrastructure to support those people, whether it's schools or housing or whatever. And so just maybe Minister, a brief comment on that, and we'll come to Tim for a final word on regulation.
Okay, and so the economic development strategy that I mentioned does highlight our need to expand our housing capabilities to support the increase in our working population. And what we want to see is greater levels of development in our major city of Hamilton, where people can live, work, and play right in the city. And so we are encouraging approved residential schemes and residential schemes within the wider city of Hamilton, as well as economic empowerment zones. But the infrastructure that we currently have, for the most part, can sustain increased population. And I think that when you have to consider the expansion of your infrastructure to support growing working populations, that's probably a good problem to have.
I think it is a good problem to have, yes, indeed. Tim, you had a last comment, I think, on regulation.
Yeah, I was just going to sort of pile on a little to what Minister Hayward was saying and in Bourne, and that is just we've been lucky enough to work very closely through Next, the trade association I was referencing previously, of these 23 licensed digital asset companies. We've literally worked with every single one of them in some capacity, and they would all agree, if they were on the phone right now, that the BMA has been refreshingly collaborative in their approach. Whereas, if you walked into some other countries, such as my home country, the US, I mean, it's not the same situation. It's nothing against those regulators. It's just not how they're set up. It's not their mentality. So it's not like the BMA is just there as the enforcement arm. They're actually helping foster innovation. So it's incredible to go in, and I've sat in many of these meetings, whether they're lunches or whether they're formal meetings in the BMA's offices. And they're looking at product roadmap. They're not only assessing the companies in the beginning, but then you're coming back to them and you're like, oh, we want to introduce this new product, or we want to have more leverage on this product, or this and that. And there's a lot of back and forth, good dialogue, but they're kind of saying like what needs to be done to make them comfortable. And it's not being done in sort of a disciplinary way. It's like, this is what you have to do. So that's extremely refreshing. And then, as Bourne was saying, there's a very rich history here from about 40 years back. So the legislation that the DABA was actually born out of was the reinsurance legislation that gave rise to the whole industry here in Bermuda 30, 40 years ago. So that's what I just wanted to underscore.
Well, thank you so much. I'm afraid the time has beaten us. We are at the end of the session. So it just remains me to finish off. First of all, by again thanking our sponsors. We really are grateful for their continued support. We have some interesting events coming up. Tomorrow, a session on ending the destruction of our undersea cultural heritage. On Wednesday, connect to systemically prosper, the ethics of belief in the digital age, and then looking at the opportunities for digital manufacturing on Thursday. So keep an eye on the website for forthcoming events. But by way of thanks, first of all, thank you to the audience for coming along. As I said, there'll be a recording available in a couple of days' time up on the website, so do take advantage of watching that or sharing it with your friends and colleagues. But enormous thanks to the Minister, the Honourable Jason Hayward, to Tim Reed, to Vaughan Collier here in London for your amazing contributions today. We look forward to continuing to see Bermuda make progress and to continue its great strides forward. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.